All right. Let's look at a Hebrew word today. I'm going to write it on the board. Write it down. Put all your phones away, please. Computers only open to blank pages. Not to Facebook updates. Which you can do after class if you want. I don't care. And today's word is oat. Or an os. Oat. What does the word oat mean? A sign. A sign. Correct. Can we discuss this already? About signs and what they do and how they help us? That's familiar. I think we did it in one class. Something like this, yeah. Something like this. All right. Shabbat is called a sign. Shabbat is called a sign. There are two other mitzvot that I can think of that are called a sign as well. Will someone to tell me what else is called a sign? Yes. What? Hanukkah? I don't believe so. I don't think so. The word oath, well, it's not the Torah. Called an oath in the Torah itself. Yes. To fill in is the sign, yes. Well done. How do you feel?
Mezuzah.
Mezuzah sign? I'm not sure. The Torah calls mezuzah a sign? I don't think so.
The rainbow.
What else? Oh, that's true. I mean a mitzvah. You're right. That was called a sign. I don't think so.
Oh, the kippah.
No, the kippah yamka is not called a sign.
How come we're only naming things that boys?
No, I don't know.
Good point. Say something which...
Is it something that...
No, it's something boys only have. Anybody else? Signs. Brit Milah is correct. Circumcision is called a sign, right? An oath.
Marriage.
Marriage is not a sign. Well, it's a sign of a few things, but the word oath, I don't believe, is used to refer to it as a sign. So whenever we see one word describing various things, it must be those things somehow are connected. Actually, this is the reason that we don't put tefillin on Shabbat. Because in order, a Jewish male has to have two signs all the time. So during the week he has tefillin and a Brit Milah, which is a constant sign. However, since Shabbat comes in, it negates the tefillin, and therefore we don't put tefillin on Shabbat for this reason. Because Shabbat itself serves as a sign. So in order to, so we need two signs all the time, a Jewish male anyway. What is a sign?
Again?
What's a sign? What does it do? Yeah.
It resembles something important.
It resembles?
Yeah.
Is that the right word? Shows. Depicts. Conveys. Okay, like that. It conveys. What does it convey?
The meaning behind something.
Meaning. Okay. What else? It does do that, you're absolutely right. What else do signs do?
Representation.
Signs in general. Give me an example of a sign. Let's go.
Representation of something.
It informs.
It informs. It informs us. For example, a road sign. What do road signs do? Sarah Cousins. They tell you where to go. What else do road signs do? What else do road signs do? They tell you where not to go, right? Nachon? What else do signs do? They give us direction, right? They direct us. They direct us. That's what signs do for us. Yeah. So they direct us, they convey information, yeah? They give us meaning, they inform us, tell you where to go, tell you where not to go. Usually the answers I get when I give this class. Any other answers, any other thoughts, ideas? So my next book I can add some more information? Because all my information in my books come from my students anyway. Did you know that? You do now, see that? Like it's not copyrighted. What else do signs do? Okay, maybe it'll come to us. Let's have a look inside this chapter and let's see a very famous piece by the Chafetz Chaim, who wrote extensively on the subject of Shabbat. We could fill this course 10 times over that he wrote on Shabbat. Okay? And the chapter of this title of this chapter, of this class, and maybe the next one, is going to be Zehir b'Shmir Shabbat, how careful a person has to be when it comes to keeping Shabbat. Zehirut b'Shmir Shabbat. When it comes to Shabbat, more than any other mitzvah, we have to be very, very careful how we keep it. And keeping Shabbat, which I mentioned before, is impossible without knowing the laws, the halachot, without reading the signs that come with it. Okay? Let's have a look, first of all, at the extreme punishment that a person gets for breaking Shabbat. As we mentioned before, more than any other mitzvah except those in the Mishkan. Top page 62. Al Adam Hashem Shabbat. The prophet tells us about the person that keeps Shabbat. This is Isaiah the prophet, chapter 59. Ashrei Anash Shezot. Praiseworthy is the person that does this. Or Ben Adam Yachazik Ba, and the person holds on to it. Shomer Shabbat, to keep Shabbat, Mechalo, from profaning it. What an amazing thing. Mechalalo, we said already, means from Mechalalo, from profaning it. V'shamei Ado, and watches, guards their hand, Masot Korah, from doing all bad stuff. Says the Midrash, Rabbi Omer, Kol HaMishameh Shabbat Achat Ketakana. Whoever keeps one Shabbat correctly, you've heard this before, just one Shabbos, and we'll all be free. What does that mean? I know it's a song. From Galus, that's right. It brings us to Mashiach. What did you say? Tell me, it's okay. It's a song.
No, she's Yeshiva. No,
I mean,
Galus.
You said Galus. Okay. Mala lava katov. Ki'ilu Shabbos Shabbat miyom shenibralom. You keep one Shabbos properly, like really properly, says the Midrash. It's as though you've kept Shabbos from creation onwards. Why would that be? Why would one Shabbos have such a power? It doesn't say you keep kosher one day, so you kept kosher forever. If you sit in a sukkah once in your life, it's like you kept in a sukkah. You keep one Shabbos properly, really well. The Shamor and the Zachor, says the Midrash, that's as though you kept Shabbos for years and years and millennia, even before you were born. Right? Shabbatot miyom shebarak HaRishbas Olamah ad sheyichyu monim ad sheyichayev mesim, until Tchias HaMesim, until the resurrection of the dead. Just one Shabbos is equal to all the Shabbos right through history. Shneimar, as it says, V'sham b'nei Yisrael Shabbat, the Jewish people should guard the Shabbat. Beini u'beinechem, beini u'beinei Yisrael, between me and the Jewish people. Ot hiliolam. Now we're going to double click on the word ot over that sign. It is a sign between me, you, and the Jewish people, says God. This is the sign between us. Right? It also says, Kol HaMishama et Shabbat ilu asa Shabbat shenema lasat. You have to lasot a Shabbat, as we say. You have to make Shabbat. If you keep Shabbat, you're actually creating it. Let's go to the Chafetz Chaim, who's going to investigate, and he's going to look at this idea of Shabbat being a sign and how important it is. Says the Chafetz Chaim, bottom of the page. Alachom Gedola, the tremendous stringency, Sheyesh B'chol Shabbat, that comes with a person that breaks Shabbat, Rachman al-Islam. We know the Chafetz Chaim spent much of his life talking Lashon Hara, but the rest of it he was talking Shomer Shabbat, talking to young people and persuading them and cajoling them to try their best to keep Shabbat as best they can. His whole thesis was, which is true, impossible to do without learning why and how. Ra'a et hachomer ha'avan sheyesh b'yisrael Shabbat. He goes, let me just show you. We may not be told the reward of keeping Shabbat because that is too difficult to know, because everyone has their own struggles. But he says when it comes to breaking Shabbat, we're told very clearly of the punishment. Right? We know there are many forms of sins and punishments for those sins. Yesh and Yanim, there are certain things, Kishadam over aleim, a person transgresses them, Hurak Isra Sabelvari, just done a transgression. Right? It's just an Isur. What's worse than that? Chamor Mizeh, so he's going through the levels. Chamor Mizeh, Havanat Shesh Alein Isur Lav, then those things that have transgressions. For example, a person doesn't do a positive mitzvah, like they don't see the Shema. They've missed out, they haven't done a sin. They've missed out on doing a positive mitzvah. Teshuvah for such a thing is very simple. You missed out. They're the things you're not allowed to do. Right? You can't eat pig. Okay? Person does that. That's next on the list. What's worse than that? Then you have certain things that a person is spiritually cut off. Karet. Even those things are teshuvahable. For example, eating food on Yom Kippur. Eating chametz on Pesach. Having relations with a woman who is a nida, all those things are karet. Okay? Not good. But there's things that are worse than that. There are things that a person is sent to a court of law, a beit din, as they used to exist, and is given the death penalty for doing them. Okay? And the lowest of those is mita chenek, strangulation. Right? Through knife. Burning. But the worst of all the punishments that exist for the Jewish people, that a person is put to death for. By the way, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin tells us that a court of law pretty much never put a person to death. If a court of law, says the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, killed a person, killed more than one person, every 70 years, it's a murderous bet din. So, it never really happened. However, between a person and Hashem, it does exist. The worst of all of them is skila, which is stoning. The al-Shabbat, and we know about Shabbat, halo yodua, we know. Shamachalota, that a person who is machalo profanes the Shabbat, who chayiv skila, which is the worst of all of them. Right? A person burns the Sefer Torah. Not as bad as breaking Shabbat. And we say breaking Shabbat, it's just simple acts. Taking out the M&Ms from the bowl of M&Ms and peanuts, and you don't want the M&Ms. Yeah? Pasolet from the Ochel. Learn the laws of Shabbat. Borer. Chav mitah. And the worst thing, you burn a Sefer Torah, you hurt someone, you steal money. Terrible things. Not as bad as this. Very incongruent. Chamura Shabbat mitot, the worst of all the mitot. Says the Chofetz Chaim, how can this be? Why are we looking at Shabbat so stringently? Why is it so bad? And he says, this is the clue to the secret of Shabbat, and why the Jewish people put so much effort and thought into it. And he gives the following analogy, which I'll do outside, then we'll look at his words inside because they're very beautiful, and my explanation will not do it justice. He says, imagine you have a store. Okay? You have a store. Let's build a nice store. Okay, what kind of store do you want it to be? We'll make it a candy, ice cream. What do Jews like to eat? Anything?
Kibbutz.
Bagels. Kibbutz. I don't know what kibbutz is. They're Ashkenazi. It's a very good food. We'll take it a bagel store, yeah? We'll call it Ellie's Bagels. Yeah? That's the name of the store. You like it? You happy with that? I don't even eat bagels anymore. But
Why? Gluten-free.
why? Because I stopped eating wheat about a year ago, my wife and I. Because we eat one bagel, health-wise, yeah. Yeah, feel much better actually. Eat spelt on Shabbat. My wife gets spelt halot.
Like wheat.
No, it's not a mitzvah to eat wheat. It's a mitzvah to make hamotzi on Shabbat. And so you can have halot made of anything. You can use rye. You can use spelt, which my wife and I do. Absolutely hamotzi, no problem. You can do that. Yeah. You can use matzah actually, but not Sephardim, because Sephardim make mizonot on matzah. Ashkenazim can make hamotzi on Shabbat on lechem mishnah, on 2 portions of matzah, if they want to. Yeah. That's just me. I'm not telling you the law. Do whatever you want. All right? Fine. So here's Ellie Bagels, okay? And a lovely store. What do we know about the store? 2 pieces of information that we know for sure. What are those pieces of information?
Eli, the owner.
Number 1. A guy owns a store, his name is Eli. Right? Some Israeli dude came over here, started selling creams in the malls, Ahava cream, went well, bought a store, sells bagels. Okay? So Eli is the owner. What else do I know
He sells bagels.
about the store? Right! They sell bagels. Nachon? They sell bagels, that's for sure. Right? If you walk in there looking for wood, nails, or hardware, you're in the wrong place. Okay? Eli is the owner, he sells bagels. Now, you turn up one day and to pick up your regular bagel filled with cream cheese and tuna salad and lox. That's big fat bagel. Sounds good actually, I'm getting hungry. I haven't eaten breakfast yet. And you turn up and you see that the lights are off and there's a sign on the door that says closed, right? And all the chairs are on the table turned upside down, you know what I'm saying? What do I know about this store? Just from turning up.
It's closed.
That it's closed. It's telling me. I turn up It's closed. Why is it closed? Maybe it's Shabbat. Very good. That's not where I'm going with this, but very good. Maybe it's Shabbat. Yeah. Maybe what? Ran out of money, or
He's taking a day off.
what? Taking the day off. That could be a million things.
She's in Punta Cana.
That's what I know. He's in what?
In Punta Cana.
He's in Punta Cana. Why is he in Punta Cana? Why would you?
Because it's nice.
It's Pesach, baby. It's very funny. Okay. You turn up a few days later, and the same sight greets you. You turn up. You turn up, and the same sight greets you. But there's a difference. Okay? There's the door. It says closed. There are the tables. But you notice, with the chairs on the tables, the lights are off. But you notice the sign is being taken down, and it's now lying on the floor outside. Same sign, but it's on the floor. What do I know now?
He's remodeling.
He's what?
Someone took it down.
Someone took it down. Why?
Because he's closing shop.
He's closed shop. He's out of business.
But he might
Bump
be
rush.
doing a remodel.
Yeah, what is your mom?
He's what?
Remodeling.
Could be remodeling. Most likely, if the sign's down, he's out of business. Just like every single, store in Manhattan that's constantly out of business. This one, though, is really out of business. Why do I know this? Because the sign's taken down. The sign is the oat. The Jewish people have a sign outside of our door. There is a sign, my friends, and this sign reads Shabbat. That is what our sign reads. If there's one sign outside the store that is the Jewish people that we have carried with us for 3,327 years and about, 300 days or something, whatever it is, it's Shabbat. Which means that the sign of the Jewish people must always be there. It cannot be taken down. Because if the sign comes down, we're out of business. And there was a promise that was made thousands of years ago to our patriarchs and our matriarchs, to our forefathers and foremothers, that the Jewish people would always be in business. And therefore, there would always be some people who are Shomer Shabbat. It must be. We looked, if you remember, at the beginning of the semester, in your midterms as well, some mitzvot do not exist among the Jewish people anymore. Okay? We know that the temple does not exist. Right? We know that the Sanhedrin, we know the Jubilee, the Yovel. Why not? Because those are things we don't put Mesirat Nefesh into. When it comes to Shabbat, however, there must be, by definition, it must always exist. There has to be a Shabbat among the Jewish people. The sign, because if it comes down, there's no more Shabbat, there's no more Jewish people. Which is why there always has to be a chelek, at least a portion, hopefully, ideally, everyone in the Jewish people should be keeping Shabbat. But at least, lefachot, as we say, at least there should be some group of the Jewish people keeping Shabbat. Because without it, we are out of business. Those are the words of the Chofetz Chaim. Let's look inside, and then let's try to connect it to the other mitzvah that is mentioned. Okay? The Chofetz Chaim does not use Eli's bagels as a metaphor, but he does use a stall, which is where I got the idea from. Top page 63, let's do this together. Some beautiful words of Chofetz Chaim, and hopefully this will change the relationship to Shabbat, which hopefully this entire course is doing anyway. HaTorah Korat Shabbat Ot. The Torah calls Shabbat a sign, Beinu Ben Israel, between me and the Jewish people. Ot Hiliolam. It is an eternal sign, or an oath if you prefer. Ki Sheishet Yamim, because in 6 days Hashem created the heavens and the earth. Hashem rested on the 7th day. Biur Nifla. There is an amazing interpretation, says the Chofetz Chaim. Lachi kara katuv Shabbat od la'arad lanu akada leno. It was called a sign to do something unbelievable. V'hu dome lacham bala melacha v'amechsa. It's like a person who owns a store. Shemetziv al beito mebechutz ezo ot shelet. He puts a shelet. A shelet is a word for a sign. Shemitzion lifnei hakol, that everyone can see it. Melachto mescharo, so everyone knows what he does and what's going on inside the store. V'hinei kol zman she'ot nitzav ala bayit mebechutz. The entire time, the sign is put on the door outside. Mora lanu, it teaches us shabal melacha, that the guy owns the store, in this case Eli, who's selling bagels, hazeh, who dar adayim bedir hazu, is still living in this store. Af, even though, im lefamim, at certain times, nosel derech, he goes along the way, alez yamim, for a certain amount of days. Even if he takes time off and he checks out of the store is always going to be there. So this is a great metaphor. Inside this metaphor is actually all of Jewish history. Mikol makom, nevertheless, adayin, still, lo akar, he has not uprooted diraso, his living, ma'abayit, in the home, in the store, hazeh, mikol vakol, totally. You can leave the store for 3, 4, 5 days. But if the sign is up, he's still in business. He can check out sometimes, but he's still in business. Masha ein kain, however, kashenitala ot, if that sign is taken, mibechos, from outside, lokovo maker, and put somewhere else, muchach, it is proved, it's demonstrating, shabal malacha, that the guy who owns the store, hazeh, kvar ikadiraso, has checked out and is no longer owning this store. Mikol v'kol ma'abayit hazeh ve'enu matzu bo klal, and you're not going to find him anymore. Sometimes the door's closed, sometimes the lights are off, and the chairs are on the table. We're still in business. Once that sign comes down, it's all done. Ken hu mamash, halfway down the page. Look at the Chofetz Chaim's words, these are beautiful. He spent time to write them down, it's worth us reading it. Ken hu mamash bin Shabbat, ki hu ot, it is the sign, ha'me'ed, that testifies, and that's a good word, ha'me'ed, that testifies, sh'Hashem yitbarach, that God, barat ha'olam, created the world, b'shesh yamim v'nach b'yom hashvi, and rest on the seventh. V'gam kain, but it is also a sign, kain ot al ish Yisrael, about the individual. So as a people, it demonstrates that we as a nation are attached to God, but it's also on the individual. Al ish Yisrael, on the individual Jew, hanosed nes, atiferet hazeh al atzmo, who puts on this nes. What's a nes?
Miracle.
Actually, that's not what it literally means. You know what it literally means? Very good. How do you know that?
You said like
Oh, in this class or another class?
like that.
Okay. It's a flag, a banner, right? Fits in as well, yeah? This is his banner. This shows, this is our degel, the degel that we put in as the Jewish people. What is the flag of the Jewish people? It has the word Shabbat on it. That is the flag of the Jewish people. Very beautiful words, I'm not saying it. Who puts on himself, on an individual, as a personal person. Ratzal Amar, what does that mean? It doesn't mean literally walk around with a flag. He says, Hashem Shabbat umekaimo. That person keeps Shabbat and fulfills it. That's what he's saying, and maintains the relation to it. That is the flag. You don't walk around with a flag. You're saying keep Shabbat. That becomes your banner. Shumamin, that you believe, Bakadosh Baruch Hu in God, Shu bara olam ha'machad, that he created the world and maintains the world. Right? And he runs the entire world. V'anachnu, and us, what's our position? That we have to do what's right, and the world belongs to him. I'm going to talk about him. And when you actually believe in God truthfully, you put inside yourself the holiness of God, as it says, ki oti, because it is a sign, beini bein b'nei Yisrael, between the Jewish people, the Dorotechem, for your generations, forever. This is going to have effects. We've spoken about this before. Not on yourself, or your community, but on your insides, and your children, and your children's children. This is the thing that's going to keep the Jewish people and your family and business keeping Shabbat. L'dat ki et Hashem mekadshchem, because you now have proven that you know that God is the Holy One. V'yalzeh gam kein remez, and that's why the Torah itself hints, where it says, Va'asoli migdash, make for me a, this is an important line, just follow this inside for a moment. This is a very important line, you may have heard this before, but we're going to click it in over here, right? Va'asoli migdash, the Torah says, after the sin of the golden calf, we had a mitzvah to build a mikdash. What was that mikdash called? The Mishkan, that's right. Right? The mikdash that we told to make was the Mishkan. Okay, now what was the verse? The Torah, this actually wasn't plan A. Plan A was not that you had a Mishkan. Plan A was that we wouldn't need a Mishkan or a Beit HaMikdash or a synagogue, actually. That everyone would pray themselves, by themselves, wherever they were. That was plan A, says the Ramban. After the sin of the golden calf, we forfeited that ability, and we had to use a central location called the Mishkan, eventually the Beit HaMikdash, eventually that became synagogues, if you will, which is the Mikdash Ma'at and the Jewish homes. We had to get together. But actually that's not plan A. When the Torah was given, it wasn't meant to be that way. Everyone would just relate themselves. They'd be at home, or wherever they were out in the field, and they would pray themselves. That was sufficient. There wasn't meant to be a Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem, or a Mishkan in the desert. It wasn't meant to be that way. After the golden calf, we lost that merit. How does the Torah describe that Mikdash? Look inside these words. You have to see them in the Hebrew. Va'asu li Mikdash, make me a Mikdash, says God. V'shochanti b'tocham, and I shall dwell within. I can't hear it. Say it loudly. Them, you. What's b'tocham? What should it say? Make me a Mikdash. If I say, make me a Mikdash, and I'm going to dwell within it, right? It should say it. I'll dwell within it, right? That's the only, if you're going to go see me, go to the Mikdash, go to the Mishkan, go to the Beit HaMikdash. I'll be there. It doesn't say, it says b'tocham. If you look inside your Art Scroll translation, it says, I'll dwell within it. But that's not what it says. B'tocham means I'm going to dwell within them or you. Right, write that down. It's very important information. It's a very famous Devar Torah on this verse.
Can you repeat it?
I will do. In the mitzvah to build the Mishkan, it says, V'asu li Mikdash, v'shochanti b'tocham. Build me this Mishkan, right, this portable tabernacle, and I'll dwell within it. Right? But it doesn't say that. It says, V'shochanti b'tocham. B'tocham means I'll dwell within it. But really, it's saying I'm going to dwell within them. Who's them? The Jewish people. If you build this Mishkan, that is going to be how God is going to dwell within you. That is the drush. That's not Peshat, but it's the drush that we learn out. Okay? That is the deep way of reading it. B'tocham mamish. Right? So the Chofetz Chaim says, aha. So we now know that just the existence of the Mishkan allows God to dwell within us. Wait a minute. There's no Mishkan. There's no Beit HaMikdash. What's left? Well, we know from the beginning of this course, if you remember, all those months ago, that the Mishkan is no longer with us, but Shabbat and the Mishkan are one and the same thing. We saw comparisons between Shabbat and the Mishkan, the precise laws of the Mishkan, the precise laws of Shabbat, right? The clothing in the Mishkan, the clothing of Shabbat. We saw the various comparisons between those worlds. Mishkan, gone. What takes its place? Shabbat. That is how God resides among us now. That is how God resides among the Jewish people. It's through Shabbat. It's not through kosher, although that's very important. It's not through Yom Kippur, that's very important. Not through anything else. Shabbat is the place. Don't take my word for it. That's what the Chofetz Chaim is saying. It is our sign. The Alken, he says, therefore, Af imar Shabbat alei mitzvah. Let's say, this is a big question. If the Chofetz Chaim wouldn't say this, I wouldn't have the nerve to say these words. Let's say a person is lacking certain mitzvot. Mitzvot aseh, which we all are, and mitzvot lo aseh, which we definitely all are. Right? Anybody here not speak Lashon Hara?
You're right.
You're right. Anybody here not offend other people?
what?
Yeah, offend other people. Anybody here? I think we all offend people. Anybody here not hate other people? You don't. Shana doesn't. Yeah, you don't hate anybody.
I hate what people do, but I don't hate them.
That's okay. That's better.
I have a question. I still don't understand why Shabbat is like the sign of like everything. There's so many like other mitzvot. I'm because there's so many Jews that don't keep Shabbat. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying like how many do or don't, but like there's so.
I'll tell you how
many
many do. About 10% actually do.
Right. I'm saying like there's so many Jews that like don't keep Shabbat. Like they do so many other things. So why is Shabbat like the thing? Because it's like that one day. Like is that what it is? Because I feel like there's so many other things that like someone can still be Jewish even if they don't keep Shabbat.
It's true. They're still Jewish. They don't lose. Although we do hear the expression, right? We categorize an observant person by Shmir Shabbat. There's something in there. I mean, that's what this entire course is meant to be, right? I think that everything that we are as a people comes down into Shabbat. Let me just finish this point, because the question's better than the answer. I can give it anyway. Okay? He says, Afimira, even if you don't do certain mitzvot, right? That means you miss out on mitzvot aseh, right? You forget to daven, do something else, and you get, he says, Im kol zeh, ha'ot hazeh nitzav leidalish, you're still part of the people. You're still part of the people. It's just like the store is closed for a few days. It happens. We mess up. We miss some good opportunities, and we fail. Oh, but if the sign is up, that means you miss the mitzvahs. But if you keep Shabbat, that still keeps you as part of the business. Okay, Rotzolamar, Shish Yisrael, who? That you're still part of the people, you're still a Jew, who Kakodem, Shkedush, Hashem, and that Hashem is inside, your holiness of God is inside your heart. That's where it is. It's located through Shabbat. And we do know, I'm going to try to answer your question, but I can't really give it a good answer. But he does say that the Gemara says that Shabbat is equal to all the other mitzvot. Right? Every other mitzvah, all 612, right, are equal to that one. You keep that one, it's as though you're keeping all 613. Right? We know that. Turn over the page. He says, however, and this is the warning of the Chavetz Chaim, Lo Kain, Im Chas V'Shalom, let's say a person, heaven forbid, breaks Shabbat, Bezehu Mesalik, you are removing Ha'ot Mi'al Atzmo, this sign from upon yourself. Umare, you are demonstrating Shebepnimiyot Levavo, that inside the depths of your heart, Kavar Enodar Ish Yisrael, you remove yourself from your people. Wild stuff. Unbelievable. He says you're going to do, even the Chavetz Chaim admits, you're going to do lots of Averas. You speak Lashon Hara, you're still a Jew. Actually, it's proof you're a Jew, right? Right? You don't keep kosher sometimes. Right? You look at things you shouldn't be looking at. You do things you shouldn't be doing. Still a Jew. He says, well, once you remove Shabbat,
You're not a Jew anymore?
you've removed yourself from your people. I'm just reading what he says. Kavar eno dar ish Yisrael. You're right? You no longer exist. You're still Jewish, because you can always fix it back. Eno dar ish Yisrael. Amen b'shem Yisrael. You believe in God. It's wild stuff. O kavar husar mikdash Hashem. You've removed the sanctuary of God mitoch levov, from your heart. You've removed the Mishkan, because remember, v'shachati b'tocham, I'm going to live inside you. It's as though you've kicked the Mishkan out of your heart, whatever that means. The Al-Ken Amru Chazal, that's what they say. Kol mechalet Shabbat. Whoever breaks Shabbat, ki'ilu kafar b'kol Torah, it's as though you've broken all of the mitzvot. Right? It's the other side of the coin. If you keep Shabbat, you kept all the mitzvot, break Shabbat, they've all gone. Yeah.
You know how, like, if you think about it, like, people that are really strict, for Shabbat, like you accidentally rip grass, or like, you'll like, maybe purposefully, like, forgetful kind of break Shabbat, but not in a way of like a phone. It's more just like, oh, like, I ripped this branch, like, I wasn't really thinking,
Okay.
like, is that,
It's a very fair question.
that's a different category, correct?
It is. Well, it is and it isn't. In other words, we are expected to learn the laws of Shabbat. He actually, the Chavetz Chaim does an introduction, which I didn't bring down this course, because everything he says in there, I've kind of spread out in the entire course. But his introduction to the laws of Shabbat in the Mishnah Brura, he gives a great detail and says that if a person does things accidentally, it happens all the time. But you can't plead ignorance if you have the chance to learn. And as I've told you before, it is impossible to keep Shabbat. It's physically impossible to keep Shabbat without learning the laws of Shabbat. You can keep Rosh Hashanah without learning the laws. You listen to the shofar, you eat matzah, sit in a sukkah. Shabbat is impossible because there's so many details to it. It is mountains, says the Gemara, hanging on strands of hair. Accidental is accidental. Onus is onus. Right? You hit a light switch with your arm. But if you can't plead ignorance if you have the chance to learn, right? You cannot plead ignorance if you've had the chance to learn. So the short answer is kind of yeah and kind of no. Bottom of the page. On move up Sefer Chavetz Chaim, and he says, Shabbat b'tziyanim k'matan tova. We know that Shabbat is compared to a gift. Shekar is a gift to the Jewish people as a sign. That is the sign. Oh, look at this. And it gives another metaphor, a very beautiful one, of a chatan and kala. He says, a bride and groom, a couple, a married couple, they can argue. You're going to argue. It's going to happen.
What?
Okay? With your husband. Right? He's going to annoy you sometimes. You're going to shout at him. Right? Not you, because you're a tzedekah, right? Yeah, right. Right? And he's going to argue with you, you're going to shout, you're going to fight. It's going to happen. It's part of life. Right? And it could be, which should never happen, you'll tell him to sleep in another room, which should never happen, by the way. Hilchos Shalom Bayit, you should always sleep in the same room. Okay? There should be no... But you're going to get upset, you're going to get out, leave me alone, he's going to shout at you, and you're going to have fights. It's not if, it's when. You're still married. You're still married. You may be upset with each other, but you're still married. That's part of life. However, if, heaven forbid, which should never happen, no matter how bad things are, if she takes her ring off her finger and gives it to him, or heaven forbid, throws it at him, which I've heard people do, which should never happen, that's a sign that things are over. Okay? Why? Because that little ring is a sign of commitment, which was put on her finger under the chuppah. It's just a piece of metal, but it's a sign. Once the ring comes off, it's a sign that things are... Can you fix it? Yeah! But that's the worst sign a person can have.
What if you throw it because he committed adultery?
Okay, I'm not going into the deals over here. Okay, I'm not going to the... There's not a class in Shalom Bayit. You can come to me after class. We'll talk about how bad the sin is in order to fix it. It's not a class in Shalom Bayit. If you want to, you read my book on it and stuff in there on how to deal with those kind of things. Some things are a very strong sign. This is seen as one of the worst signs a person can do. Is once the ring's gone. It says Shabbat is the ring that Hashem put on the Jewish people. Shabbat is the ring that Hashem put on the Jewish people at Har Sinai. It was given special attention. That's what the Chafetz Chaim's words. Once the ring comes off, shidduch is done. Kachol gam b'Matan Tova. So too the gift. Remember the Matan Tova? Remember those weeks back, right? He says that Kol Oda Kala Knesset Yisrael. All the time the ring is on the finger. That's Shabbat. We're still married to Hashem. Machzikim b'Matan Azu. We're holding on to this gift. Ot. It is a sign v'Aristach Leolam that we're consecrated forever. Shabrit ben Yisrael v'Kedusha Brichu Lo Hufra. That has not been nullified, the gift between the Jewish people. As a sign point, that's why to fill in Elohim among the Jewish people and Brit Milah. Right? Funny. Even the most secular Jews, right? Although we're seeing a movement against it, heaven forbid, unfortunately recently, but even everyone knows you give a Brit Milah. Right? That is the covenant, it is the sign, it is a promise. Okay? And those are the beautiful and powerful words of Chafetz Chaim, which I don't think any of you will forget for the rest of your lives. You may forget algebra and other stuff you learn here, but I don't want to ever forget that. Turn to page 65. Let's do another piece. And here we're going to answer a very interesting halachic dilemma and learn something about Shabbat, which is extremely unique. And what we're going to discuss now is a very weird, excuse the word, halacha that we see. And that is sounding the shofar on Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat. Sounding the shofar on Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat. Do we sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat? Yes or no?
We can't do the shofar on Shabbat.
We don't. But why can you not sound the shofar on Shabbat?
You're creating sound.
Creating sound. Is there a malacha, Daniela Esses, that says you cannot sound? Are you in my Hilchot Shabbat class?
No.
Ah. From what you know about the laws of Shabbat, are you allowed to sound a shofar on Shabbat?
No.
Why not?
Because you're creating something.
What are you creating?
You're creating a sound.
No problem. Nowhere does it say in the 39 malachot of Shabbat, trust me, I've been through them many times, that you cannot sound an instrument on Shabbat. Maybe the rabbis came along and made a gezerah, a decree saying you can't do it. For example, you can't play guitar because it may break, you may come to fix it. That is a gezerah, the rabbanan, that is the rabbis make an enactment. But that is not Hilchot Shabbat. Why can you not sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat? Well, first of all, is it a Torah mitzvah to sound the shofar? It is a rabbinic mitzvah. Which one is it? Please tell me you know the answer. Was anyone in my Rosh Hashanah class last semester? Put your hand up if you were. Is it, Alexander Seelenfreund, how are we here? Is it a rabbinic mitzvah or a Torah mitzvah to sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Oh, very good. Yeah. No, it's a Torah mitzvah. It is a Torah mitzvah. Now, truthfully, you may be thinking as a female, right? Because it is a mitzvah shezman grama. It is a mitzvah that time causes. So you could be right in saying, well, as a woman, we're not be obligated, we take on the obligation ourselves. So really, everyone takes it upon themselves. But it is a Torah mitzvah. Why do we not sound the shofar Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat? It's a Torah mitzvah. What's stopping us doing it? Considering it's not a malacha, doesn't even resemble a malacha. You're not creating anything. You're just blowing air into a ram's horn. Anybody? Not heard this before? Okay. So the answer is very, very unusual. And the answer is that a person may come to forget it Shabbat, or a person may want to practice sounding the shofar and carry the shofar in a Reshut HaRabim, in a public domain. That is the reason. I know, that's why I'm here to explain it to you. You see, one of the Tanai Malachot is you cannot do Hotza'ah. You cannot take an item, any item, into the public domain, Reshut HaRabim, and carry it more than 4 amot, right? About 6 feet or so. You also cannot take an item from a private domain into a public domain, or a public domain into a private domain. Reshut HaRabim Yachid, Yachid HaRabim.
So that's the purpose of the Erev.
So the Erev comes along. This is a long, complicated story, but the Erev comes along, and, well, Reshut HaRabim won't take, but an area that isn't Reshut HaRabim, Reshut HaRabim is a public domain with thousands, some say 600,000 people walking through it, and a certain minimum size, and turns an area that isn't that, which is pretty much any streets pretty much you see around us, and says, you know, we'll put an Erev around it, and turn it into a Reshut HaYachid that you can carry in. Okay, that's what an Erev actually does. But we're nervous, say the rabbis. We're nervous that you're going to come along and you forget Shabbat, or, you know, I need to practice because this is a Torah mitzvah, right? And you're going to take the shofar and you're going to carry it to the synagogue. Because there's a possibility, remote, but a possibility that you're going to carry the shofar.
So you can blow it at home.
You could. But they don't let you. And they say, don't touch it. It's not a mitzvah. It's muksa. On Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah, don't touch the shofar. Now, 1 second. Trust me. Just hear this out for a second. That's really strange. What's unusual about this scenario the rabbis created, which is the halacha to this day? We don't sound the shofar Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat. If it falls on Shabbat, we sound it the first day or the second day, right? Whichever isn't Shabbat, because Rosh Hashanah, even Eretz Yisrael, is a 2-day chag, so everyone is going to hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but they're only going to hear it once if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. Why? Because there is a concern of a very remote possibility. What is that remote possibility? That someone didn't practice, forgets a Shabbat, and carries the shofar. So turn around like it and says, we'll just sound the shofar at home. No, we don't want to risk it. So there's a gezerah by the rabbis. A gezerah is a decree by the rabbis, a rabbinic decree that pushes a Torah mitzvah. This is very unusual, and says we're now going to be mevatel, going to nullify a Torah mitzvah, a mitzvah aseh, say with a possibility that maybe some guy is going to forget, and therefore that, you know what? I'll keep the shofar in synagogue before Shabbat. Not good enough. I'll practice. Not good enough. I will have a sign saying, don't touch the shofar. Don't carry it outside. I'll leave it an Erev. I'll check the Erev, which will allow me to carry it. Not good enough. It's so strange. It's like really, really out of context. Trust me, a rabbinical maybe, that maybe through maybe you'll come to, don't risk it. Daniela.
I have a question. Isn't it blowing the shofar or like crowning Hashem?
Yes.
So when we're in Shabbat, we recognize that Hashem is our God and that He took us out of Egypt and that He's the only God and etc.
So what are you saying, Miss SS?
So shouldn't we be able to play the shofar, to blow the shofar if they both correlate? And
Oh, yeah, I thought you were going to say something else. You ruined it.
I think
You
so.
ruined it. You got to the hole, you got to the punchline, and you dropped it off. You closed the curtain right before the end. Say it again. Think you were off to a great point over there,
But
which we're going to see Chazal make. What is that point?
if they both have sort of like different
Yes, they do, as you know. Yeah.
functions,
So
should we be permitted to?
no, you said the same thing again.
I,
If they both do the same thing, yeah, then
then they're permitted.
No, you only need to do one and not the other.
You need only one sign.
you need one. You don't even need it. Shabbat, we're going to see, takes the place of the shofar. That's going to be the ultimate answer. That's going to be the ultimate answer. You don't need the shofar even. Very good. You don't need the shofar because Shabbat gets the job done. Now, that is already a drush. That is already a deeper understanding. On a basic understanding, the rabbis said, don't do it because you may come to break Shabbat. So let's look at two reasons why, and we'll investigate both of them, yeah? The first one is just halachic concern, an extreme one, Let's see Rav Moshe Schwab, how he understands this. And he says, Mautam hatakana. What is the reason of the decree? What decree? What is the takana we're discussing here? That you can't sound the shofar. Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat. Shema, perhaps. Ya avirenu dala. You're going to carry it for Amot. In a public domain. Right? That you're going to do this. Lonim samakom levatal mikol Yisrael l'mishech tekufa rucha mitzvah shofar. And because of this, right, when we think about this decree, we're simply thinking in our minds that there's this distant possibility. Now, son, in order to reach this concern, we've had to jump over many hurdles, right? In order to stop sound of the shofar. What is that? First of all, he's got to forget his shofar at home, right? Oh, I forgot to take it. That's number one possibility. The gamas are dying and mechav mezev chil Shabbat. He hasn't broken Shabbat yet. So go home, like you said. Then go home and sound the shofar. I forgot it at home. Don't carry it. I'll sound it there. You can sound the shofar wherever you want. After sound the shofar in a synagogue, I mean, that's the best way to do it. But Rov Am Hadrat Melech for many people. But if you forget it, right, go blow in someone's home. Right, sound it for yourself. It's good enough. Right, that's good enough. But there's another concern that would have to, another hurdle, some far-reached possibility. And maybe you'll forget it Shabbat. So first you've got to leave it at home. Then you've got to forget it Shabbat and carry it for Amot. Right? It's just highly unlikely that's going to happen. Right? What are the rabbis teaching us? Right? What are they teaching us? A very important lesson. This whole decree of the shofar is there to teach you a principle. Because the chances of one person throughout history doing it is remote. It's just unlikely. You've got to leave it at home, not practice enough, then forget it Shabbat, then take the shofar and carry it. I mean, it's just very, very unlikely. And for that unlikely possibility of a possible unlikely, oh, don't do a Torah mitzvah. Are you crazy? That's just insane. This halacha is there to teach us a lesson. Sometimes laws teach us what to do, and sometimes they teach us an idea. Follow bottom page 65. There is a far-reach possibility. We have to create a really weird scenario. Forgetting it at home, forgetting Shabbat, carrying it to practice, forgetting that I can do it at home, not knowing the law that I can stand it over at home. Just very strange. Rachok, it's distant. This could happen once in 1,000 years, this possibility. It's so remote. One person, 1,000 years. Right? Don't do it. Don't risk it. Don't risk breaking Shabbat. Right? Guy is not an Eruv, is a Rishut Rabbim, leaves it at home, forgets Shabbat. This one guy in 1,000 years is worth all of us not hearing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, falls on Shabbat, for that one person through history who could mess up. That is how careful Chazal are with Shemar Shabbat. That is a boundary you don't see anywhere else in Jewish thought. You just don't see it. You just don't see it. Let's finish this. Stop over the page. Now, so here's the point which we reached ourselves. Just like we accepted upon ourselves the yoke of heaven through blowing the shofar, right? He says, so too, by being careful with Shabbat, actually saying by being careful with Shabbat, you get the same as the shofar. You hear? So not just Shabbat. By being careful with Shabbat, page 66. By being careful by keeping Shabbat, that zihirut is the same as the shofar. You hear what he says? You're learning something. Being careful by not breaking Shabbat is the same as hearing the shofar Rosh Hashanah. I'm not even doing the positive mitzvah. Just be careful not to break it. That's as good as hearing the shofar. Why? Because both of them are mekabel ol malchut shemaim. You put the yoke of heaven upon you, he says. Kachi ba'alidei hamida shel zihirut. Careful. And by the way, some people are not strict with many laws of the Torah, but when it comes to Shabbat, they're very, very, very careful. What they do, what they touch, what they say. Right? What they say. I know people who make a tan dibur on Shabbat. They won't talk any extraneous speech on Shabbat. Whatever needs to be said, they'll say anything else. I don't say anything to do with the weekday activity, nothing at all. Unfortunately, I'm not at the level, but there are people who are like that. Right? Hirurim uturim, even the thoughts they have on Shabbat. They're so careful with many, it's so specific. Can I open this? Is that bowl rare? Can I open that can of soda? Is that package? Am I ripping through letters? Right? So many laws. That carefulness, say Chazal, is like hearing the shofar. You don't need the shofar because you have Zehira Shabbat. Okay? Yeterim is not only that. Ein lach kabbalah ol shamayim shalot kalot b'toch hamida zo. Every time you see Ol Malchut Shamayim, there is being careful. Being careful. Right? You jump to the bottom, let's just finish it off. This halacha is a lesson. It's a remote possibility, extremely remote. It's not about that person carrying the shofar. It's not about that. If you think that's what it's about, you're missing the whole point, he says. It's about the lesson we learn, and that is the rabbis were telling us, don't play with breaking Shabbat. Right? The rabbis made rules that push, a rabbinic rule that pushes a Torah asay. It's very, very extreme. Okay, you get to hear the shofar at least once, you know what I'm saying? Right? Because it's always a 2-day chag. But so what? I could hear it twice. Not good enough. This teaching teaches us lekabel et hargasha, to accept the feeling. Ad kama leinu, how important it is. Liot zihir b'chol maseh, to be very careful with all our actions. B'dibur, with speech, machshava, with thought. Liot b'pachad, that we're constantly in awe and fear. Lifnei kol p'ulat shema ani ba l'dei avera. I'm going to do the wrong thing. Im ela b'derech zo efshel sev zo le'avera, can lead to the wrong thing. Im mistakel kan, he's actually learning this out to all areas of Jewish thought. All right, being careful what we do, what we say, it's all learnt out from this example and the carefulness of Shabbat. So the carefulness of keeping Shabbat is going to teach us about how careful we have to be in all of our lives, and what we say, what we do, how we treat people, bein am lamakom, bein adan lachaveiro, between us and God, between us and each other people. It's there to teach us this. Right? The Eza binyanhu, and how we, and that's what we learn. Everything's in our hand except the fear of God. Ultimately, it's in our hands, right? How much we fear God. A person would realize how big a destruction bring upon yourself. Okay, we don't have to go into it. He says how bad it is and how careful we have to be. Okay, that was a heavy class. next on Monday, God willing, we'll begin the next chapter of the tremendous reward a person gets for keeping Shabbat. The schar, which is going to be seen, is unbelievable, and we're going to see specifically what the rewards are. Okay, very good.
When's the paper due again?
Paper is before paper.